Welcome to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, and Rule Breakers. I'm your host, Cindy Glanzrock. I am thrilled to introduce Renee Cox on today's episode. She is a friend and someone I've long admired in the world of art, an accomplished photographer who is one of the most charismatic personalities with nothing to hide. It boldly shows up in her photography, and she can be described as a controversial African-American artist because of her interpretations. She uses her own body to celebrate Black womanhood while criticizing a society she views as racist and sexist. She had a successful career in the fashion and advertising world and then decided to go into the world of art and back to school, graduating from Syracuse, then the School of Visual Arts, and the Whitney Program of Independent Study. Her first one-woman solo show was in 1998, where she was the center of attention as a Black superhero named Raje, a dynamic and powerful, beautiful figure which heightened the visual impact of her work, making Cox's politics clear and engaging. Her solo exhibition this summer at Guildhall in East Hampton shows a deep connection and concern with art, history, and social issues. In her series, Flipping the Script, she uses iconic religious imagery and references European masterpieces to make a point of absurdity and warped perceptions. Renee continues to push the envelope using new technologies in the digital medium of photography and soul culture, a new body of work which she adds a new twist to, using 3D images and multimedia. Working from her personal archive, she pushes the limits of her older work as she continues to unleash the potential of something that might on the surface seem quite ordinary, but then brings it to a new realm of possibility. She is the definition of a trailblazer, innovator, and rule breaker. Let's welcome Renee Cox inside the She Cave. I am here with the artist, my friend, and my inspiration. Someone who I look up to, and I also am surprised by constantly. As Roy Rogers said in his article about Renee Cox, the unflinching gaze of Renee Cox in the Purist magazine when it opened up at Guildhall at the beginning of August as their first exhibition since the Guildhall has been in renovation. It's a cultural center, and Renee Cox is a cultural woman. There isn't anything that Renee hasn't touched, which we'll learn about shortly. She is an impressive woman, and as some people have described her also, as a controversial woman. But I see her as a smart, sexy, bold-faced, funny, and she's just full of life. So you are lucky to meet Renee Cox. Renee, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Cindy, for having me on.
We're excited to have you here. So Renee, let's go back for a minute in time as a trailblazing, innovating, rule-breaking woman invited into the She Cave. Sometimes you sit on top of statues of liberties. Sometimes you're sitting in taxis. Or on top of taxis. Or you're bursting out of an Aunt Jemima or Uncle Ben box. But right now you're inside the She Cave, and I want you to take me back to where you were born in Jamaica, since we both have Jamaica in common and we both have Westchester in common, as I've spent time in both those places with family and friends, and we connected as a result of that, haven't we?
Right. So, born in Jamaica, born in Colgate, which is in St. Anne's Parish. Came to the United States with my parents at about 6 months old. From there, we were based out of Queens. We were in Jackson Heights. The first 4 years of school, my parents sent me to Catholic school, where I would say I got a lot of inspiration from the religion of Catholicism. Then from there, my parents thought they were going to move back to Jamaica, so they decided to send me to boarding school there, to like a real sort of colonizers boarding school, English headmistress, demerits, the whole 9 yards, and then decided not to move, actually. So I was
like, so you went to boarding school, a British boarding school?
In Jamaica, in Manderville. And after doing a year there, and it was pretty strict and stuff. It was like if you talked out of turn, I'd end up having to sit on the headmistress's veranda. on
You must have
many
been there
occasions.
often.
I was actually, yeah. Mrs. Skempton. She was like, we didn't really have a fond relationship, let's say that. And then after that, then my parents brought me back since they decided not to move to Jamaica. And then they sent me to boarding school, ironically enough, in North Haven out here in the Hamptons.
Catholic school, religious school, or not?
Yeah, it was Episcopalian. So we had chapel and whatnot. There was a priest who lived there with his wife and family on the campus. Yeah, it was an interesting experience, but it introduced me also to Sag Harbor, North Haven, as a kid. So that was kind of cool. We'd spend time on Long Beach and stuff like that. And,
Were there many Black students in the school?
Not many, but there were some. I wasn't the only one. Well, actually, in Jamaica, obviously wasn't the only one either, like in some other spaces. So yeah, no, it was mixed, and it was all girls school run by these nuns from Arizona. They were even buried on the property. Then from there, left there, came back, went to another school out in Bayside, and then from there, then we moved to Scarsdale. And then I graduated, from Scarsdale High.
So you went to Scarsdale High, and there was a picture of you in your Catholic school uniform. That was where was that taken?
That when I was in Catholic school in Queens, because I'm like 4 years old in that picture.
You look so well behaved in that photo.
Yeah, well, that's the impression we like to give.
And were your parents strict with you, or did they let you do whatever you wanted?
No, no, they weren't like, I don't know, like horrible, but no, they were strict. Those days you didn't get to do whatever you wanted. It wasn't that, you didn't have like helicopter parents. And you would get beatings, you know what I'm saying? If you did something wrong, you'd go to school with welts on your body the next day. And the teacher would be like, what happened? What did you say to your parents? Why did you piss them off? Basically. Yeah. It wasn't like, oh God, we're going to call child services, you poor thing, and remove you from your home and put you into foster care. No, there was none of that sort of stupidity. It was like, you obviously pissed them off and that's it. Even with
there
my
might
own
be some
kids.
there might be some parents out there that have taken it a little too far.
Oh yeah, always anything, But like the funny part would be like when I had my kids and we would go to Jamaica. As soon as we get off the plane, I say to them, "Okay, you better behave, because here, if I knock you upside your head, there's nobody going to be coming to your rescue. In fact, what they're going to say is, why did you have your mother get so upset that she had to do that?" Right? Nobody's going to be calling child services and going, "Oh my God, this woman just hit her child."
From what I understand, your sons Tasha and Ziggy are perfectly well behaved.
Oh yeah, no, they are. They are. They have plenty of personality, but yeah, no, they're not rude or anything like that. They're not like, dare I say, a lot of Westchester children that I encountered when I was living there, when they were in school, my sons, that is, where they come over to your house, they don't say hello, they just run right past you. It's like, I'm like, God, like, you don't have any manners, you know what I'm saying? And then, God forbid, you sit down to eat with them. They have no table manners whatsoever. They eat like barbarians. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, on to how children behave. I know you have some of the artwork with your children in it. That's at Guildhall currently. What made you decide to expose, besides your own body, because of course nudity is part of your work, and your children? Your mama Donna has Tosh. What made you decide to have them as part of your work, your artwork?
Well, it's an interesting question. A lot of women ask me that, like, what do? You have children, you're making art. Well, what I say, you use the things that are near and dear to you and close to you. Why make your life difficult trying to do something that's the polar opposite of where you are in your life situation? Consequently, I had 2 children. I had a baby. Oh, wait, this is the good time to do, a Madonna and child. I don't need to go to central casting and find some baby. I have a baby. So my point with that is just utilize what you have. You know, I think a lot of
Very
people
good.
don't do that. They look outside and beyond, and I'm like, why are you doing that? That's like such a waste.
What's the significance of the clothing you're wearing in your Mama Donna? While we're at it, the significance of the with Tosh.
Tosh is in your Mama, Donna, and Child. That's the first image that you see when you come into the exhibition, which is framed like a classic Madonna and Child that you would see at the Met, with the crown molding and Corinthian columns and the entire bit. The clothing that I'm wearing in that photograph is done by a folk artist named Janua Moja out of Washington, D.C. Basically what it is, it's all the fabric that's been printed in African fabric that has been printed in China. So that's the little twist with that. Followed up by a feather headdress, which is Yoruba inspired. My other son, my older son, is in a black and white photograph called My Son, where I have him draped in an American flag that I have altered. How did I alter it? I colored everything in black, and I left one white star and I left one stripe, just sort of as a gesture to say, yeah, there were some white people here, because I'm convinced that when Betsy Ross did the flag and she came out and said, look what I did, look at the flag, whatever, there was some black lady up there, like actually putting that shit together. So, which is the case for most things during that era anyway, right? So that was my little read on that, to alter the flag like that, because black people built basically the wealth that America and Great Britain and other colonial states built their economies off of.
There was a quote that you had said, it's about time that we reimagine our own constitutions. I think that was it was well said. We've seen this, the way you see it through your eyes is very different than when most people walk through that exhibition. It's one of those exhibitions that I think hearing the artists speak to the different works at Guildhall really raises the bar on the importance of the work.
Right.
I mean, you're
Which
nude
is a
in several
testament to
pieces.
the lack of history that's taught in this country, is basically what it is. Because it's like that history, those histories are not taught. And now you're in a situation where they're definitely not going to be taught, thanks to people like, DeSantis in Florida. So, I mean, that's why I think,
Well, that's why people like you at least teach at Yale. Are you still, that's part of what you've done in the past. You've taught at universities and schools and spoken out.
Hmm?
Where did you last speak? I think you had shared that with me the other day where did you speak recently?
Well, the last time that I spoke was actually at Guildhall with Deborah Willis. And we had a conversation, it was really good. It was very good. It was very animated. It was very truthful. And generally what I speak the truth, and I speak in normal language that people can understand. So I'm not trying to speak in art speak. I'm not trying to alienate people. I want to bring people in. I want people to begin to know the story and to get some perhaps interest that would compel them to even do some of their own research as well.
If you could just tell us a little bit where it started and where it's gotten to now, just a little bit of, I'm familiar with Raje, which is behind you, right? That's the Liberty, the piece.
Right. Chilling with Liberty, yeah.
And you did obviously you as Wonder Woman. It was interesting, the story about you walking into, I don't know what toy store it was, but you were like,
yeah, it was a Toys R Us, and I needed to get Christmas gifts for my kids, and they wanted, at that time, Power Rangers. So there I am fighting with other parents, like literally, to get these Power Rangers, like as if it was like a football game or something, a tackle. And while I'm doing this and procuring these toys for them, I realized that there are no black superheroes. And I was like, oh, wow. because I didn't really think about it because I used to shoot a lot of editorial, like the first 10 years that I was out of undergrad. And for Essence magazine, I had shot this one character called Sunman. And he was supposed to be like the new Black Superman. And I shot him, and that was it. Never heard about him again. So I don't think it took off, as it were. And I was just like, wait, I need to do something about that. A lot of my stuff can be very, there's a reaction, there's a hole in the culture, so to speak. I'll see it. And then I'm like, okay, wait, I need to do something about this. And that's really how Raje came up. I started doing the research because I didn't want to just anchor it in something that was completely make believe. I wanted it to have some sort of historical kind of references. So I looked to Wonder Woman and Charles Marston's work. And in doing so, I found out that he had actually created a Black Wonder Woman named Nubia.
Right.
And when I found that out, I was like, okay, game on. We're going to do this. And then I said, I was going to call her Rage. But then I said, if I call her Rage, like white folks are going to get turned off. They're going to think I'm just like an angry Black woman. So then I was like, maybe call her Raje, which has more of a sort of ring to it. It could be a perfume. It could be anything. You know what I'm saying? I went in that direction with her. And
the question is, do you have a costume every Halloween where you dress up as Raje?
In the beginning, when I did the piece, yeah, I did probably for 2 years after, but no, not since then. I still have the costume.
Well, I love Raje on top of the taxi. Can you tell the story why you decided to put Raje?
Why I had to do that? Well, because at the time in New York, if you were Black and you hailed a cab, you would oftentimes have a driver stop, and the first thing out of their mouth would be, I'm not going to Brooklyn and I'm not going to Harlem. And it was like, wait, I didn't even ask you that. Like, what the hell? But there was that assumption. And that's if they stopped. Most of the time, most people's experience was they didn't stop. Like they would like literally almost run you over and get to like, if you were in the middle of the block, they'd like run right by you and go to the corner to pick up some white person. I mean, that's how blatant and obvious it was. At that juncture, I felt like, okay, my superhero character, that could be a task for her. So I basically took a note from the 50-foot woman, like the B movies of, I think, the 1950s, and had Raje in Times Square, just picking up an entire taxi.
What about the one where she's bursting out of the boxes? First, you mentioned
That's the liberation. That's the liberation of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben from their boxes. It's basically the slaves that worked up at the big house were totally desexualized because obviously they didn't want the master or his mistress to be sort of double dipping, as it were. So they made sure that the people that worked at the big house were desexualized, not interesting, whatever. Then the other question for me was, why is it called the Uncle Ben? And why is this Black man on this box? Like, do we own this company? And of course, no, we don't own the company. So then I'm like, why are we on the box? This is crazy. Same thing with Aunt Jemima. And Aunt Jemima went through a lot of iterations, actually, before they finally took her off the box. I mean, even at one point, I think it was Gladys Knight played her. It's crazy. So it's sort
because
of like,
of you,
what's this underlying? Well, I'm not going to say it's because of me. Other artists, Betty Saar, lots of artists have like addressed this too. I'm not the only one. But I would say that summer of Black Lives Matter, that's when they decided to actually finally free them from their boxes. Everybody wanted to be like politically correct now suddenly. Up until that point, it was like, no, we'll keep them on the box.
About,
We feel
when you
comfortable knowing there's a, big Black lady in the kitchen flipping some pancakes for us. She would not poison us.
All I can tell you is, I know you make corn fritters because you said you have a recipe for that, but I make some mean buttermilk pancakes.
No, I make banana fritters.
Banana fritters. And I make mean buttermilk pancakes. So when you come over, I'll make the pancakes. You make the banana fritters, okay?
Yeah. Deal.
You said that's your next project. I know you have many projects. A lot of famous people know your work. I don't know if they own your work. I know you said Russell Simmons has, which piece does he own?
He has Your Mama's Last Supper.
Your Mama's Last Supper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that it's perfect segue at the Brooklyn Museum.
Correct. That was at the Brooklyn Museum in a show called Committed to the Image. It was 95 African-American photographers. That was back in 2001.
And your work seemed to particularly upset Mayor Giuliani, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, what it was what I would call a revisionist look at Da Vinci's Last Supper, his fresco in Milan. I had when I was at Syracuse University as an undergrad, I did a semester abroad in Italy studying art history. The message was, here is all the greatest art in the world, blah, blah, blah. I didn't see anybody in there that looked like me, except for, maybe a Blackmore somewhere, at the Uffizi. That would be about it. And I was like, wait, I need to rewrite this. Just like white folks wrote the history, I felt I should be able to write my own history the way I see it with people that look like me.
Well, especially Jesus Christ, because as far as I know, I understood he was black. And I'm like, why is there no black Jesus Christ in churches?
Right.
And then, but you decided to be
Jesus Christ.
Jesus
It has to do
Christ.
with white supremacy is what it does. That's what it's about. The advent of white supremacy, which started about 400 years ago. That's when they started doing all that shit. European, they didn't call themselves white. There was no white, black. It was based on ethnicity. It was like, oh, you're
Right.
European. Oh, I'm Portuguese. I'm Italian. I'm a Gaul. I'm from Germany or whatever. It was like that. It wasn't like, oh, I'm white. No, that wasn't the classification. That only started, that's man-made, the whole race thing. It's not really steeped in any sort of real science at all. At the end of the day, which people don't realize that, but I'm here to tell you that's what it is.
There's science and there's tradition. And the traditions that we know of from, if you go to synagogue or church, are still, you see white men. You don't see usually men of color as part of the paintings or the murals. So I wanted to ask you, you chose to be Christ at the Last Supper and to be naked.
Right.
How come?
I chose to be Christ. One, as I stated before, I did go to Catholic school, and in Catholic school, the message was, we're all created in the likeness of Christ. So if that is the case, then my Christ should be me, right? Which is interesting because, it also kind of ties into Buddhist philosophy as well. You're God, I'm God, everybody's God. And it's for us to get to our godlike state in this particular life situation that we're in. So that's what they told me. I was very happy with that when they told me that. And they had to call in a Jesuit priest to talk to me because I really didn't buy their propaganda in Catholicism. And to be specific, it was because I was in fourth grade and I had to do Holy Communion. So the whole practice thing for Holy Communion is this nasty wafer dried up thing that they're so the thing with the Holy Communion was they'd make you practice. And there's this little dried up wafer that actually comes from, at the time, Secaucus, New Jersey, which was supposed to be the body of Christ. And then there would be...
The body of Christ came from Secaucus originally? That's the origin of Christ? Secaucus, New Jersey?
No. Who knows what the origin of Christ is?
I hope not.
I'm saying for the ceremony of Holy Communion in the Catholic Church, right? They're oh, you've got to practice, right? So you have this wafer that's made in Secaucus, New Jersey. Place it on your tongue. You can't chew it. You have to let it dissolve on your tongue, this nasty, tasteless thing. And then they pass around a chalice of wine, which they then tell you that's the blood of Christ. At which point I said to them, isn't that what cannibals do? Aren't those the people from Papua New Guinea? You know what I'm saying? We're eating his body and we're drinking his blood. How much more pagan can you get? Even though in the next breath they're we hate the pagans, they're the worst. which was like, really? Okay. So they sent in a Jesuit priest to talk to me because they didn't know what to do with me. And the Jesuits within Catholicism, they're the more intellectual branch of Catholics.
I like
They're
those
smart.
Jesuits.
Yeah, they're smarter than the other ones. So, and it's the Jesuit who said to me, he goes, your church, your temple is within. If you're in touch with that, it's not even necessary to go to church. So, of course, at that time, I was very, very, very happy with that. So I was very happy with that explanation.
Where does that move us forward? Because I'd like to move forward here a little bit in terms of your art form or your fashion or the way you raise your children or the way you live every day.
No, it was the fodder. Catholic school was the fodder for imagery down the road, as an artist, the Last Supper, the crucifixion piece, It Shall Be Named, that was in the Black Male show, Adam and Eve, quite a few things.
How about the references that you've made to Italian art history or French art history? The piece that's at Pussy Pond.
Manet's Déjeuner sur l'herbe.
Which you said also means something else, even though there it's called Manet Déjeuner sur l'herbe. You said it also it goes further back in history, art history.
Well, it goes further back in art history, I guess, on the technical side, not necessarily a philosophical side. Mm-hmm. Manet was looking at 3rd century Roman sarcophagus, which I found on my own, and then found out that that's what he used. He took the composition from there. Yeah. So that's, just from a technical standpoint, that makes it interesting. Philosophically, it's, whatever, nothing.
And what about the life-size David? He's holding a book in his hand. Can you tell us about the reference?
Right. Well, life-size David, again, a piece that I was exposed to many times because I was in Florence. In the one from Michelangelo, he's carrying the rocks to defeat Goliath. And I was like, okay, we're not going to do the rocks. We're going to do something that's even more powerful, which is a book. And the book is by Chet Diop, and it's called The African Origin of Civilization. And the thesis behind the book basically is that Black Africans built Egypt, Sudan, where you have the most amount of pyramids ever. Europeans went in there and tried to say it was built by aliens. It was built by the Greeks. It was built by anybody but Black Africans when it's on the continent of Africa, which is, really ballsy.
And you have, next to that incredible David, you have yourself naked,
holding my then 18-month-old child, my oldest son, Ziggy.
And some people described it, I think in one article I read, as like you were holding an Uzi.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's their interpretation of it. But that's not mine.
No,
mine is quite simple. It's just that is the way. If you have children or you're around children, the quickest way to move them from point A to point B is like that. And I'm wearing a pair of stilettos because for all the girls that say, oh, I'm supposed to wear sensible shoes as a feminist, I disagree because it just doesn't give the body a nice line, period.
Now you're wearing a lot of, I see those platforms that go straight across versus the stilettos. That's what I see you wear because you're always...
Well, you see me wearing that because I'm in the Hamptons and everything is outside and you have to, walk on grass and so on and so forth.
You always look fabulous, Renee. As you walk through this exhibition and you travel through it, you get into this one room with this collage that's going on, which I would love you to describe what you're doing now. Also getting into NFTs and this photography mapping and that wonderful multi-sensual experience with the music and the video. Everyone's blown away from that 12-year-old little boy we met to 70-year-olds. Every age, color, background is blown away by it. Can you tell us what's going on with your work now? It's just so beautiful.
It's a little bit of a long story how I came to soul culture. That's the body of work that you're speaking of. Basically, it came out of a trip in Bali. What happened was I was feeling depressed. I was feeling sorry for the little me, as it were. I was like, why don't I have a book? Why don't I have a retrospective. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? Doing all the crap that one should not do if one wants to remain sane. Comparing myself to other people, blah, 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 all of that. And I was traveling alone. I was staying in a beautiful villa-ette. And I even had a butler. So, hey, why am I like upset? But I was. And
I hope he was a good-looking butler.
He was okay. I mean, he was all right. I mean, I took him to places he had never been before in Bali, which was like really funny. I took him to a cockfight, actually.
That doesn't surprise
Where I was
me.
like the only, I'm digressing, but I was the only woman, and I was definitely the only Black person in this tent with all of these men that had razor blades basically on the back of their roosters' legs. Anyway.
So back to art.
So here I am in Bali. I'm traveling alone, but a friend of mine told me to get this audiobook called Living the Liberated Life and Dealing with the Pain Body by Eckhart Tolle. And I had that on my phone. And I had previously tried to listen to Eckhart, but if you're familiar with him, he speaks very slowly. He's very deliberate.
Yes.
And I think when you're in an unconscious state of mind, it's virtually impossible to listen to him because you're like, get to the point. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? You're like frantic. But this time, since I was so upset and feeling sorry for myself, I was able to listen to him and it actually calmed me down. It brought me down like, 10 notches, right? I'm listening. And then he says the real life-changing thing for me. He goes, why are you waiting for the world to validate you? And I was like, oh,
good point.
Wait a minute. Why? Yeah, I'm an only child. I've always waited for that. And always, was waiting for people to tell me that, I was smart, I was talented, whatever, I was cute, I was this, I was that. And if they didn't, I would even get in people's faces and be like, wait, don't you see me? I'm here. What's wrong with you? Actually, the warning with that is if you see somebody doing that, know that that's the first signs of madness, actually. With Eckhart, what's great with him is that he actually explains how to get out of your head or what he would call your egoic mind. And he's like, you have to be the witness to every thought that comes in as it comes in. So literally, after I got this information, I immediately started doing it. And for 2 days, like nonstop, and I mean a real 2 days, because I had a lot of negative thoughts coming in. Each one that would come in, I go, okay, get the fuck out of my head, basically. And it gets out of your head. Okay. Now, if you have a lot, another one's going to come right away. And you got to do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
And that philosophy evolved into artwork, photography?
Yep. Once I understood that, I was able to do that. And then what happens to you, you begin to get what the Buddhists would call spaces of no thought. Mm-hmm. So you don't have these thoughts coming in anymore. And it's from those spaces of no thought that I was able to create soul culture.
I see.
That is the point. Because if you're there second guessing yourself and going, oh, can I do this? Will they like it? This, that, and the next thing. Well, you won't do anything.
Right.
So it's like that was the freedom that I was afforded to me once I understood this very simple principle, actually.
So going to Bali, being alone, reading Eckhart Tolle,
listening to Eckhart Tolle. Reading Eckhart Tolle will not help you.
Okay, so
because
listening,
you have to reprogram your mind. That's what it is. Because the society that we live in is constantly trying to draw you back into all the bullshit. It's telling you you lack something, you're not enough. Maybe if you had a bigger car, you'd be happier, a bigger house, you'd be happier. All the bullshit, right? But it's all about their capitalism. It's about them, certain people making a lot of money off of that. And that's how people are basically manipulated. The least manipulated place that I've ever visited was Cuba, contrary to what the Cubans will tell you down in Miami. But the people that I met when I went to Cuba, they don't have a lot of material stuff, but they were happy enough to, teach me how to do salsa dancing in their apartment, So it's like a whole other different vibe. And down there, you don't have the commercials. Billboards are more political. It's either Marxist or communist.
They're not going anywhere. They're there to stay, most of those people, and they look on the bright side of every day and what they do have, and whether it's, like you said, their dance or their food or their education. Right. They don't have much opportunity. So if opportunity is important to you, you're not going to be very happy living in Cuba.
Well, yeah. But I mean, they have very good doctors. They're very well trained. And guess what? Right. They're into it. They're passionate about it. They don't just do it because, oh, well, I'm good in science and math, so I could be a doctor and I could make a really good salary, a good living. That's not their purpose.
Let's talk about your artwork, because unless we're doing it, we're going to go back to the artwork that you're doing. What's changed with your work now with technology? How have you brought technology into it besides the digital photography?
Yeah, I mean, it plays a role in, actual production. You know what I'm saying? There's things that you can do now that you couldn't do, say, 20 years ago very easily. It also allows me at this point, I've been playing around with NFTs or just animating my photographs, making my photographs move. And I can do all of that on my iPhone, which is great. I like to know what's going on, and it's all about what's going to enhance the work. Period. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. What enhances the work? What makes the work maybe more interesting? What can make the work reach more people? All of that. That's the mission.
So when you're sitting in that room and all that photography is coming at you, and it's on the floor, it's on the ceiling, there's music, you're saying that was created because of your trip to Bali. That all came as a result of that?
Yeah, it comes out of that.
Okay.
Not that music specific thing, because I mean, when I was in Bali, nobody was really doing projection mapping. So, I'm not saying that it didn't exist, but it wasn't as sort of readily available. Let's say that.
And do you collaborate with musicians? Do you collaborate with other people?
Yeah, I collaborated with a musician on this guy named Don McKenzie. And then I also collaborated on a projection mapping with graduate students from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh.
Your next, you have a show or you have another exhibition coming up. Tell us about that you're looking forward to. Some travel plans?
I have another exhibition coming up at Princeton Art Gallery. That's in November. And in some ways, I can say it's sort of a continuation of this show that I did at Guildhall, because at Guildhall, I showed work from 93 to 23. So this is like 30 years of work. So you can't put that all in one show. In fact, the piece that's behind me, Raje series, it didn't work in the iteration of the show that I have at Guildhall. So
do you have the little catalog of the show at Guildhall with you? I love that catalog only because there's Raje. Here, move it over a little bit so we can see the title. Summer Program Guide at Guildhall, which is Raje, what you see behind you.
Right.
And what I love about the program is it really gives such wonderful insights. I know you had obviously someone that curated it, worked on it with you, but there's nothing like being there with the artist, of course. And I loved going with you to the Jackson Pollock House last week. That was fun, just for you to see the space that someone else from the Springs worked in, and just seeing how you were sort of inspired.
I loved it. That was the model. I said, that's what I want. That's what I want to build on my property. Something as simple as that. So
in that case, you were inspired by the space he created for himself. What about any artists that inspire you? Are there any that inspire you or have in the past?
Well, in the past, I mean, it was definitely Abaddon, Deborah Turbeville, Irving Penn. Those people were a big inspiration.
You did some pretty, when I say cool work, you did some albums. You worked with some music groups. So you worked with Spike Lee.
I did Spike Lee's School Days poster. I did Gangstar, Step Into the Arena album cover. I did Jungle Brothers, Done by the Forces of Nature. Yeah.
And anything planned in the future in terms of NFTs, movies, Netflix movies? I mean, you're still...
after Princeton, then the next show will be at UTA, which is United Talent Associates out in West Hollywood.
Great.
And there I'm going to be showing the projection mapping, the soul culture, three-dimensional work, the ones that are hand cut. And I'll also be showing some of the NFTs as well.
You actually have, or your team cuts out these, well, often they're figures or naked figures, and then you place them on top, because it looks like it's dimensional, the work.
Well, it is dimensional. It's three-dimensional. That was something that after I had been doing them, I got interested in fractals and sacred geometry. So I started manipulating the imagery flat, right? And then after a few years of doing it just as flat images, then I moved on to hand cutting various parts of, photographs. And also I will add all of the photography is my photography. Nothing is appropriated or anything like that. And then I started using that kind of like as a painter would use palettes, of paint. And then I was able to sort of build up on my photographs and create this three-dimensional vibe with it, which makes them unique. So, which is a good thing.
Are you now in the world of this, when you describe your sacred geometry, do you think that you're in a more spiritual place in your life as a result?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Totally.
And do you think that's age, specifically as you get older, your children are now older and you're all close and you have a close family and you've been with your husband for 40 years, which you told me your mother...
I think it's like, I don't want to say it's age specific. For me, it happened older, but I am convinced that if you taught what I sort of briefly described earlier to kindergarten children, they would get it, and you wouldn't have bullying, you wouldn't have fighting, you wouldn't have internet trolls and all this other stuff, because it would be just like, why would I do that? It's like so boring, like you wouldn't have people going to war. They would be like, oh God, look at the photographs of like Vietnam or Civil War or Pol Pot or whatever. We're not going to do that again. People would be thinking like that. So it would change people's mindset for sure.
You've had an exhibition, I think you called Flipping
the Script.
The Script. It seems throughout your life, the script has been flipped. I remember you were saying this story when you were in the fashion world, and you said, can you believe who just got out of prison?
Right, Nelson Mandela,
which was a big deal. And they said, no, but did you hear that Donald Trump and Ivana are getting divorced? So you were so like blown away that was what mattered to them. And you're like, I need to get out of this world, that this world is not the world I thought it was. You were even saying that the intellects, when you went to the Whitney program, which you were accepted in, I guess that's when that happened. You were like, I thought I was with people that cared about the world, that were intelligent people, and they seem to care more about gossip.
Well, no, that's not gossip. What they seem to not realize, because it was a huge double standard at that time, that a woman artist could still be a viable, relevant artist and still have children. Because they were of the mindset that if you were a woman artist and you had children, obviously you'd become brain dead, and that you were just doing baby blue and pink, like forget-me-nots or whatever. You wouldn't have any juice, so to speak. And
you were saying that about when you had your child, they made that comment about, well, now what are you going to do? You're pregnant? What are you going to do?
Exactly. And it was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? I just started. So I'm going to give you pregnancy is what I'm going to do. I'm going to elevate pregnancy. And that's what I did. I was doing that before Annie Leibovitz and the Demi Moore Vanity Fair cover and stuff. This is what it is, and women can give life. And as far as I'm concerned, I should be on a pedestal. Worship.
You were at work and you were like, I have to go breastfeed, and you just like went off and did your thing and came back, and.
Exactly. What I say now to college girls, it's like, which is what my mother told me, which doesn't fit the feminist paradigm. However, it fits, I think, life's paradigm. It's like my mother said, you have to find your husband in college.
And you did.
And so I did. That was not my objective. I told my mother I wasn't there to get my MRS, but she had a point, and it was a valid point, because that's the only time where you have, let's say, 4 years to, really get to know somebody without, especially in the day that I went to college, without a lot of pressure. Meaning you didn't have loans up the wazoo or anything like that, because it was still affordable.
And you're
and she
together
was
with
right.
your husband 40 years later, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I got married in 1980.
Wow.
So what happens is that you end up growing with this person. Okay. Now, the feminist thing kind of came into play, and it was like, oh no, get your career together first. Do this, do that. So next thing you know, you're 40, and now you're looking to get married and have kids. And I'm like, Mother Nature is, she's not like at that place. You know what I'm saying? Mother Nature, I mean, if it was left up to her, you'd start having kids at 15, 16 years old. That was the plan, So waiting all this time, I just say you're just making the IVF doctor like rich. That's it.
Maybe that's going to be next. You're going to have a whole series about the future, women in the future who are having children at 60 or 50 plus.
Yeah, I mean, which is,
the next super women.
Yeah, like it doesn't really work like that. Even the men having the kids, they don't talk about it, but a lot of those kids have issues.
I believe that we all have our own path, and we choose it more or less. We could say we didn't choose everything that's happened to us in our lives. That's true. But we can get out of sometimes our own way, or help others, which I'm sure you do. I'm sure you've mentored. I know you teach at Yale, and you're mentoring. Do you help young students, or do you have any charities that you're involved with?
No, it's not that kind of party. I'm not involved with any charities.
Okay.
But I do talk to a lot of young people.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of, young girls, and I try to impart some wisdom and some practical information,
Well, you
for
keep
them.
it real.
I do. Very real.
Well, you are your mama, so we all come to you to hear your pearls of wisdom, or we'll just say just wisdom of truth of being, or proof of being, which is the name of your exhibition right now at Guildhall. And we all look forward to get there before September 4th. And hopefully we're going to figure out where Renee is next and follow your career. And thank you so much for being on Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, and Rule Breakers, because you are certainly one of them.
I was never big on following rules.
No.
I don't like rules.
Well, let's keep breaking them, Renee. Please subscribe to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, Rule Breakers, wherever you listen to podcasts, including but not limited to Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. If you prefer to watch, you can visit us on YouTube.